Up next, we got writer Stephen Knight has left the Rey Star Wars movie. Knight replaced the original screenwriter just last March, but this looks to be another delay to the development of the film. Notably, Knight has been busy working on the screenplays for Peaky Blinders feature film, an upcoming biopic starring Angelina Jolie, and several TV series. Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is still slated to direct the future Rey movie. Is this officially development hell, or will the light of the Force shine eventually?
I don't think we're quite to development hell yet, but this movie has faced a lot before it's ever gotten off the ground, and it was announced years ago, and it's always kind of been under the radar a little bit. And then we had the director announce, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy directed most of, if not all of, Miss Marvel. I can't remember if it was all of it or just most of it, but she was heavily involved with Miss Marvel. And it seemed like a good idea to me on the surface. Like, I don't know about you all, but I was not crazy about the development of Rey's character in that sequel trilogy. I really liked the character. I liked her as a lead. Like, I love Daisy Ridley in that role. But there's just like weird stuff. Like, I hated the way Rise of Skywalker went, and with the she's a Palpatine and I'm Skywalker and all this stuff. Like, I did not like that. And I think most people are probably sort of in that camp on the sliding scale of what did you think about the sequel trilogy. And so the idea of bringing her back and trying to jump ahead in the future and do something new and fresh, I was excited for, and I think it's a good idea to try to kind of move away from that sequel trilogy and to kind of move into something new and develop this end of the Star Wars universe. But to see it already lose a writer, this means that it will get delayed. This means that it won't come out when it's supposed to, that it'll
lost its second writer too.
Right. So that's not good. You know, we here on Multiverse News and Stranded Panda in general, we want things to do well. We support fandoms of things. You know, you're not going to really catch us like dogging a lot of stuff on here unless we see it and we just don't like it. Yes, I didn't like Aquaman. I'm not going to bring it up again. But ultimately, like, we don't do that before the movie comes out, right? Like, we want things to do well. Like, even if it's not our thing, we want it to do well. So, like, even if Star Wars is not our thing, we're like, we hope it's good for Star Wars fans. So if you want to find, you know, like, the clickbait hate that goes on about Star Wars, there's a lot of it out there. It's not here, but I think there is a conversation there about the hurdle that this movie is going to face in that realm, because we definitely saw that The Acolyte suffered because of that, right? Like, The Acolyte, you know, say what you want about it creatively, just from a business standpoint, the show was not a success, right? It did not get renewed for season 2. Its ratings were really low in terms of, like, its viewership was very low. It went down as the weeks went on. And a lot of the conversation around The Acolyte, unfortunately, was not even just the toxicity, but it was like the commenting on the toxicity, right? So, like, you know, I still believe, and I still will always believe, that most people aren't like that like most people don't wake up and just decide to go nuts over, you know, Star Wars on the internet or whatever. But I think what happened is a lot of the conversation became just about that, right? As people were saying, like, well, I didn't really like this aspect of the show, but also like this toxicity thing in Star Wars and toxicity in Star Wars, and it just kind of becomes this like thing that just overshadows the whole thing, right? It's like we're having a conversation about this, and yet, you know, you've got this show going on that people are into and they like and they want to see more of, and it just kind of derails all of that. And so now we don't get a season 2, and it's just a whole thing. And so now we're entering this new age, and we've got this Rey movie on the table, and it's already happening. The movie hasn't even been shot. Doesn't even have a script. If you go on YouTube right now and you type in stuff about this director, what you're going to find is people taking a quote that she said, where they asked, hey, how do you, I don't even remember where it was, but it was taken way out of context. It was like 8 or 10 years ago she said this, but for some reason people think that she said it about the Rey movie. These people were asking her on like a podcast or something, how do you walk the line between, you know, saying what you want to say politically and making a movie? And she said, shouldn't have said it, but she said, I just love making men uncomfortable, or something like that. And the problem is when you do that, it just, like, there's an easier way to do it. You can say, I hope to bridge generations of fans together. You know, whatever. I don't. It doesn't like just something else, because now that's become the conversation. You know, if you look, it's like, well, the Rey movie's going to fail because the director hates men, and it turns into that, and it's just like that's so frustrating to me, because it's like you want to see this universe do well. Like, I love Star Wars. I don't want to keep having a conversation about like fandoms around it. I just want like people to make movies from Star Wars, and I'm just afraid and I'm worried for this project that it's gonna hit that. It's gonna start stepping on those landmines of just the thing that people want to plant their flag on, kind of like what the Acolyte happened to the Acolyte. I'm afraid that that's going to happen here, you know? And so it's tricky. And I think like, as we continue to learn more about this movie, hopefully, you know, we see it develop. I think it's got a lot of potential. I think it could be a great story, but you know, it's going to face an uphill battle. It's already going to face an uphill battle and doesn't even have a writer yet.
Yeah, I think this conversation really does piggyback off of the one that we just had about different franchises and extending them and whatnot, because what Star Wars is trying to do is make stories for timelines that haven't been touched in the original movies. Well, let's say the first 6 movies, right? I'll go on record on saying I wasn't a big fan of the sequels. I tried, didn't work out. But they've had the opportunity to play with streaming and play with different characters and play with different storylines, and some have hit, in my opinion, Mandalorian and Ahsoka, and some weren't so great, like Book of Boba wasn't quite my favorite. And Acolyte, I think, was doing a great job on setting up a universe and another timeline that we haven't had the opportunity to discover. But, you know, the story just didn't hit as much as they were hoping that it would. So, as Jay mentioned, like from a business side, like it didn't do as well as it was supposed to. So, like, this is just another opportunity, right? There's a character that's been established. There's a timeline that hasn't been explored, which is post Last Skywalker. Was that the last one? Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker,
excuse me. There's another timeline that we haven't really discovered yet. So there's the opportunity to be like, okay, what's some stuff that we've been wanting to do with Rey that we didn't get to really hammer down on? What is the threat of this point? What is some stuff with the Force that we want to explore and discover? So like, I hope it works out, because it's the opportunity for creatives to come up with stories. It's for writers and directors to have the opportunity to maybe express their love for Star Wars in a new modern way, and I hope that it works. I don't want bad Star Wars content. So it's just one of those things where it is a tricky situation because of the sensitivity of Star Wars. But yeah, I hope that they are able to figure things out and just come up with a good story for the fans.
No one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. I hate to tell you.
You're funny. I think that some of the projects that were announced, I'm always going back to Dave Filoni being chief creative officer, because a lot of things have changed in their proposed lineup for Star Wars since that happened. Like, I think the things that were already being made, like the Acolyte, were made, and they put it out because they're not going to go back on that show that cost them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. But I do think that I hope, I'm trying to pretend like I'm living in the Lucasfilm offices there in California. Like, I'm hoping that these, you know, this writer leaving could mean nothing. It could just mean that he's busy with other projects and he can't devote time to this. It could mean they just can't land on the right story. And at the end of the day, it's probably better to have have all the right people in the room than the wrong people in the room. And so if you can't get together because of, you know, concepts or scheduling or whatever, it could be something as banal as scheduling, then that's okay. I think that the Rey movie makes sense because I think that by the time it gets made, there's kind of that new audience that could be discovering Star Wars, because that's always something that I think studios have to think about, is like that next generation of what's your Star Wars and what becomes the thing that you're entering a franchise or a whatever at. And for some people, you know, the Rey movie might be their first thing if they're a young child, or maybe they're an adult fan who's like, I'm just gonna watch. I mean, you never know how people get into Star Wars. It's just kind of one of those things that the strangest thing might be their entry point. So I think that it just is what it is right now, and I think that they're taking time with this film, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah,
for sure.
Get a little bit of distance too. Like, we have this new world that we're kind of fleshing out. We know Filoni is going to expand to the big screen. Like, give it some time, let it kind of flesh out a little bit. Get a little bit of distance from this conversation that, you know, surrounded The Acolyte, and maybe it'll feel like you get a little bit of distance from some of the controversy. You know, just that kind of stuff, and maybe it'll feel a little bit more natural at that point.
Yeah, and I feel like this writer change, just like Haley was saying, is likely because of scheduling stuff, because he just got they just announced the Peaky Blinders movie was a go, and then the guy who's writing the Peaky Blinders movie left this movie. It just makes sense to me that, like, either this movie wasn't on track to go as quickly as he's ready to write it, or, you know.
And they're currently filming Peaky Blinders, so
Yeah.
Oh, right.
he's probably busy.
Exactly. Like, he went and did that, so, you know, makes sense.
I must say that Vino El Bambino in the chat says Dave Filoni needs to announce a Minimum Rebo movie. Could not agree more. He is our king. We will worship at his feet.
Neil.